Recording
or
in
spoken
progress.
will be part of the public record. If panelists want to ask any questions or make comments as we go through, there's a raise hand button at the bottom that would be helpful if you could click that, just because then I can see you easier. And anybody from the public wishing to speak, you can use the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of your screen if you are on Zoom. Just also to let everybody know that lots of questions were asked and answered by the school department ahead of this meeting, and they are part of the packet if anyone wants to go and look at that. So our next agenda item is open forum. Does anyone have anything for open forum? I'm not seeing anything. So we will go to our next agenda item, our 705, which is a review of the department budgets for the schools. And I believe we have Superintendent Chris Chu presenting.
Thank you. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. And I was hoping to just kind of highlight some of the slides that were in the packet as well that come from the updated presentation that I had shared with the school committee on January 31st. So our very first, let me see, open my preferences to allow me to do this. It might be more problematic, Dan, than I had hoped for. My computer might not be allowing me to do that at the moment. So just for the timeline, actually, Dan, if it's possible for you to share that slideshow, my computer's telling me that my firewall won't let me share it on Zoom right now.
Okay, absolutely. I'll bring that up right now.
So if you could just go to slide 6, that would be fantastic. So what I wanted to start with is just where the school committee approved the budget request of $63,961,692. That is our official request at this moment in time. That's what the school committee voted on February 28th. Originally on January 10th, I presented the initial budget, which there was still some variability in the difference with the town allocation, and I'd been working with both Dan and town manager Jody Ross to determine what the town allocation could be. And so what you'll see here in the second column under FY23 was that in the updated presentation on the 31st, the town allocation was able to increase by $4,800,000, and we were able to decrease our need by $225,000. And so that's where we came up with the final number of $63,961,692. Could you go to slide 7, Dan? So the adjustments that we had made for that specific time that came up to the $225,898 was that we are going to reduce 2 central office administrative positions and absorb them into 1 new director position. We're going to be reducing hours for our principal aides, and we're reducing 4 of our 15 reading interventionists. And so that information is there. We can answer questions to any of these things as we move forward. Now, if Dan, if possible, if you could slide to slide 14, because the other thing I kind of want to highlight and share with everybody, thank you, is that one of the things that we had done that Pat Lenhard, who is our new Director of School Finance, who's with us tonight, along with Assistant Superintendent Carrie Cleary and Director of Pupil Services, Courtney Moran, the 4 of us did a great deal of work just diving in line by line, looking at the budget as we were drafting it. And before we even established our initial request, we had already identified that based on our enrollment, we were going to reduce the things that you see on this slide right here. So we are reducing 4 positions at Westford Academy, 2 positions at the elementary level, and 2 positions at the middle school level based on our enrollments, along with the MCAS aid stipend, which had existed for a long time. But now that we've moved into online MCAS exams, those positions were not as necessary. So that's, we had identified $517,000 before we had even presented our need to the school committee. So I kind of wanted to share that. If you go to the next slide, Dan, the two initial adjustments that we had for new requests was this: we're increasing our substitute pay from $80 to $90. So this year we'd actually increased the sub pay from $80 to $100 using ARPA funds. In order, we needed to increase the pay, and we had increased it to $100 for the budget moving forward in FY23. We're looking to actually build it into the general operational fund and only increase it from 80 to 90 instead of 80 to 100. So that's what that reflects. And then we did have a request that was supplied through ARPA funds to bring in, I'm sorry, it was through the ESSER 2 grant to bring in an additional person into our HR department. So that's the 1.0 human resource personnel. Now, that was part of the original request. So then when we went back to meet the $225,000, that's when we looked, and we're going to be absorbing the coordinator position. This human resource personnel is a member of that department, but it's not the coordinator position. So as we move the HR department under the assistant superintendent's responsibilities, there will still be a reduction of the HR coordinator, but this was a new position. So I wanted to make sure that I showed that to everybody. And then if we can move on, Dan, I'm just going to quickly you can go to the next slide too. Again, this was in the packet. I just wanted to kind of remind people of the things that we had talked about in order to get there. So in our closeout of FY21 in July, $863,128 of surplus was returned to the town. That was a surplus that was primarily due to COVID relief funds. And then we had started the process in October because we needed to submit our plan for the use of ESSER 3 funds. And we had started the process of exploring what we would do. And that's when we started developing the tuition-free full day kindergarten budget timeline, which started earlier. Before then, we started doing the full FY23 exploration and budget development, which I just wanted to again remind people of that timeline. Thanks, Dan. You can go to the next slide. So one of the problems that we identified early on was that there was a shortfall in FY22 of $751,000. And breaking that down, what we had discovered is that $596,000 was one-time funds that was needed last year to close out the FY22 budget for this year. And so that was a hurdle that we already saw going into building the FY23 budget. Now, $292,000 of it was from the Student Opportunity Act. We had actually absorbed 2 curriculum coordinator positions into one. So we have the STEM coordinator. So there was a savings there. We have the shared field supervisor within the facilities department. And then we did see $55,000 from bus fees. Thanks, Dan. And I just wanted to highlight again the process that we had gone through, the deep dive into the budget, looking closely at our enrollment numbers. One of the things that has been very helpful for me and for Pat has been that we've had regular meetings with our school committee, the subcommittee finance, the finance subcommittee that has helped us throughout the fall as we were talking through different budget concerns and different budget plans, and then even moving forward, talking about our plans for the future as well too. And then we did meet with Dan and Jody and shared our specific numbers in December on the 13th as well. Thanks, Dan. So I think most people are familiar with this, but this has specific numbers in it. So I kind of wanted to share just quickly the different revenue categories that we're looking at. If you can go to the next slide. So when we talk about our circuit breaker, reminding people that this is a reimbursement that comes from the state. And for FY23, the amount of $2,084,797 is going to be used for out out of district tuition that's coming from circuit breaker. We have the grant 240. $820,000 of that is also going to be used for out of district tuitions. Previously, a lot of that grant had been used for salaries, and then it wasn't FY, it might have been between FY21 and FY22. I can't remember exactly which year it was, but the school committee had made a very concerted decision to move towards using that grant specifically for tuition instead of salaries. And we brought those salary into our general operating fund as well too. And then we have the miscellaneous revenues that I think many of you have been familiar with, and those were the numbers that are projected to be used in FY23. Those 5 different groups right there. You can go to the next slide. So then we talk about our expenses. You can go ahead and move over. Thank you. So our biggest portion of our salary, of our budget is clearly our salaries. And so we have 10 of our 11 collective bargaining agreements that are expiring this June. But these numbers here in the different breakdown is reflective of the current contracted salaries. So it doesn't include any negotiated increases. It does include step increases that we would automatically be planning for, but it doesn't include any of the potential negotiated increases. Go ahead, Dan. Thank you. And then we look at our operations and facilities as another one of the major areas. And so one of the concerns that I think we've had in the past and that we're still talking about is that our budget does not support regular preventative maintenance. And so that's something that we want to keep talking about, and it's a concern that we have for our future budgets. So you can see at the bottom of the slide, just the difference between the FY22 amount and the FY23 amount is it's in terms of operations and facilities, it's not a significant growth there. Thanks, Dan. And then our special education out of district tuitions. There's a great deal of fluidity that takes place with special education. We wanted to kind of share the information there about where it's supported by, from the general fund, from circuit breaker, from grant 240, as I'd mentioned. We're sharing there the different numbers of students that we're looking and planning for in FY23. That we have 26 students in private day schools, 10 students in private residential placements. We're projecting 13 students at Valley Collaborative as our member collaborative, and 3 students in non-member collaboratives. We're not projecting at this time students at programs at other public schools. That has happened in the past, but we're not projecting that. And you can see the different numbers on the bottom of the screen there between FY22 and FY23, an increase of almost $300,000. And so then we talk about our transportation costs. Before, when we actually started the budget process, we were still looking to look at our contract with D. We have since settled an agreement with them as well too. One of the main concerns that is different in this slide than is in some of the questions that have been answered is that we now know in March, this was developed again in January, and I just didn't update this slide, that the current projected expenditure is actually not $790,000. It's actually now $810,000. And that's just more. We now know in March where we think that where they're going to be for the rest of the year. So we don't anticipate that growing anymore. We believe that that would stay put, but that's $310,000 over the budgeted $500,000 that was initially there. And then the next slide. So then, I kind of joked when I did my first budget presentation that, you need a good pie chart if you're talking about a budget presentation. So we just kind of wanted to share at the end with the pie chart showing what we had thought about for our budget summary. But in essence, those are the slides that I wanted to just highlight for everybody to kind of bring everybody up to where we were through the process. And now I'd love to open it up to conversation and questions. Christina, you did mention that we were able to communicate and answer a number of questions that the committee had. And so I know Director of School Finance, Pat Lanhart, is with us and ready to answer any questions that that I might not be able to answer as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Well, let's open it up. Anybody have questions? Don't be shy. I'll go first if you want.
I can go.
Okay, go ahead, Heather.
All right. They're a little bit going to be all over, I think. One of the things you just talked about at the end is that the special education transportation was going to be over budget by 310,000. I'm wondering if you've done any projections on where you're going to close out FY22.
We can actually, yeah, go ahead. That actually probably was more appropriate to even the FY22 number than how we came up with the FY23 number. But Pat, can you go ahead and talk about that?
So Heather, to confirm your question, is your question just basically not transportation related, but just full
Right.
budget? Where are we landing for 22?
Yeah.
So we're watching it closely. I'm a little hesitant to put a number to it right now. We haven't used our last offset yet. We haven't used school choice yet. So we're just monitoring. All the other offsets have basically been applied. So we're still monitoring at this point. We have one of our biggest drivers right now is how substitutes track. So I'm not super comfortable putting a number to it. You know, it's March 10th. I think I need a little bit more time before I put a number to it.
Okay. So, but you think overall that you would meet it with the available offsets, that you wouldn't have an overage by the end of the year that you'd need to come to a reserve account with FinCom or anything like that? Or you think possibly yes?
Oh, with school choice?
Well, no, just with the whole picture. Of the school,
No,
like-
no, because school choice is our cushion, right? School choice is what will save us.
Okay, and then another question I had was on the contracts that are yet to be negotiated, and this is just me being naive. How does inflation affect that kind of stuff? I mean, are you expecting a large increase in negotiations, or are you kind of capped?
We're limited by budget limitations.
Right.
So it's going to be probably a difficult. agreement.
Yeah. I mean, we it's one of the conversations that we have, and just that we have a very specific amount of money, and so that's what we need to use to negotiate with.
Okay, my last one. On one of your revenue slides it didn't divide it out, but there was $800 and some thousand for full day K, early drop off, and the preschool. And I think one of the things I'm worried about is adopting the full day K into the budget. I'm coming from every year, the schools come in more than the town's been able to provide. So I have a hard time seeing how that's going to fold in. You know, I know the school choice was mentioned, but I just don't really have a sense how that's going to work into your budget later on. And then one of the things I've noticed is the revolving account still had ins and outs in FY23. I'm assuming maybe that wouldn't really be there. But then also, what kind of balance are you going to have left in the full day K that you would apply to future full day K? And then I kind of struggled with, it seems strange to me to have money collected from people who have paid for full day K in past years and use that to pay for full day K in future years.
So I mean, the idea, first of all, the idea of how we plan to, I think, fold it into our general budget, right, is, and the general fund is, we do know that we'll be looking at, I think, continued enrollment driven reductions, right? And so we know that for some of it. The idea of spreading out how we use the ESSER funds and school choice and the full day K revolving accounts over those couple of years allows us to minimize what the impact is on the general fund as we roll it into the general fund. So we do have if we don't have tuition-based full day K, then we have a responsibility to actually use those revolving accounts and to and to use them within so much time, right? So we would have 2 years in which we would be able to use the money that's in the full day K revolving account currently in order to help bring that cliff of a cost of bringing full day K in, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, but I guess part of my thought too, though, is, I mean, if the revolving account was accumulated from full day tuitions, was it not charged in previous years for full day expenses? So that, do you see what I'm saying? Like you gathered this pot of money to use in future, but that kind of seems unfair to the people that paid into it.
So I can answer that. If you look at the revenue account records that I provided, that there were expenses charged to revolving. The only other thing I can say, Heather, also is so whether the money came from the revolving or they came from the general fund, the expenses were borne, right? It looks like maybe my predecessors didn't need to use all of the revenue from the revolving accounts, but then that meant that the general fund must have supported the expenses.
Heather, are you all set?
I am, thank you.
Okay, Valerie?
I just wanted to add on to Pat's answer that the finance subcommittee has certainly talked about moving forward with some best practices for all the revolving funds. And I know that's come up before about you know, maybe setting some policies about what to apply using what's come in the year before and what's an expected balance and stuff like that. So we do expect to be reviewing and setting some good practices moving forward.
Thanks, Valerie. Actually, I'd like to jump in on that. So are you talking about all of the revolving accounts? Because there are several that balances keep growing. Yeah, I think you.
Yeah, we are talking about all of them. Sorry, I'm nodding. And
Okay, I wasn't sure who was nodding.
We are looking at them. And what I will say, one of the things that we looked at right away with full day K was the amount that's in school choice. And there is more money in school choice than we think that there should be. And so part of our plan is to be the ability to be able to use ESSER 3 funds and our school choice funds over a period of time to, I think, bring it to where it should be to be supportive, but it shouldn't necessarily be at such a rate that it is. And the other priority that we do have is to, we do need to build up our special education stabilization fund, right? That's something that we do need to build up, because that's actually going to help us with more sustainable budgeting in the future. And then that's something then that is, there's a lot of checks and balances as to how that money is used. And so so that is one of our priorities moving forward.
Okay, because I did my own projection forward for school choice. And it's still looking like there's going to be, you know, close to 1.3 million at the end of FY26 based on, you know, current.
Oh, I don't think, yeah,
spending
there must be something different there, though, because that's not the way that when we projected it, that's something we'll look at, because
Okay.
that's one of the things that's actually one of the things that we specifically talked about.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, because I mean, I could tell you what my assumptions were, and they may not be correct, but
Maybe. Yeah.
yeah, I'd be curious to look at that. Anybody else have questions? Or Dennis?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Christine. How are you, Dr. Chu?
Good, thank you.
I just wanted to, I was listening to your conversation about the ESSER funds and Grant 240. And I want to just make sure I understand exactly what you're saying. The town manager put out a policy, basically a budget directive, in her budget message. It's on page 7, where she talked about being cautious about the ARPA funds and a lot of the other related funds that have come in since COVID, so that we don't plan budgets in the future based on those things. And then when they dry up, we're left holding the bag. From what I'm hearing you say is that you are aware of that, you are attuned to that, and you're trying to wean wean it into the regular budget through a lot of the different changes in demographics and everything else that are going to occur. Is that what I'm hearing?
That I am glad that that's what you're hearing, Dennis, because that is
Okay.
exactly what I'm trying to communicate.
All right.
Thank
Well, you hit one, so that's good. You
Thank
got
you.
one up.
You all set, Dennis?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Scott?
I guess I'm kind of curious though, because we have, the theory is, as I understand it, is that we have ESSER funds to take us to some point in time for all-day kindergarten, full-day kindergarten. And the theory is that the demographics will then support a transition away from that. But we have declining enrollment now and an increasing budget. So I'm trying to figure out what actually changes in the budget assumptions that says that there will be somehow free cash appearing with declining enrollment in the future that's not appearing now.
So our assumption is not that there will be additional free cash in the future to support that. Our assumption is that we would be using the ESSER 3 funds along with the other revolving accounts that we have that would be appropriate to use for it. And then it's going to be our responsibility to actually carve the difference, which in the first year is, I don't have it right in front of me. I want to say I think it might be $316,000, maybe $319,000. It's over $300,000. And then each year after that, it declines over the course of the 6 years. Where the assumption is not that new enrollments or new students would help us pay for that, if I've said that correctly.
No, I guess I thought that the rationale is that enrollment would be falling off over time as it has been. And I guess I was understanding, perhaps incorrectly, that the idea is that as we have future enrollment declines at some modest pace, that would allow us to have funds available to be redeployed towards full-day kindergarten. But
Okay, I understand. Sure. So what we're really looking at more when we look at the projections is that we're sort of leveling out, right? We have been declining maybe for, maybe even when we look at it over the past 15 years, it's been declining. And we're looking at it leveling out in a way that there are, in some cases, what we talked about this year was just that we recognize that in some ways we were living beyond our means. And so we didn't necessarily have the same student population that supported the number of resources that we had in terms of staffing. And so our challenge has been to look at how we can maintain the services and the support that we have for the students that we have. And so our assumption is not that there would be more students coming in that would help pay for that, or even that we'd be continuing to lose students and therefore being able to reallocate the services. We just want to be looking at the actual numbers that we have in front of us. And I think allocating the resources appropriately. There was an assumption originally when we started talking about full day K, and other districts have done this in the past, where when you go from half-time or half-day, full-day, half-day kindergarten to a full-day program, that your numbers from DESE would change to reflect that. And honestly, we've been held harmless as our numbers have dipped below what our enrollment was previously. We've been held harmless by DESE, so we won't see an increase right away from the numbers from the state when we go to full day. And maybe I'll explain this way. Since we have technically we have half day kindergarten, we do allow people to tuition to pay for full day, but our free kindergarten program is technically half day. So all of our kindergarten students count as 0.5. They count as half of a student as far as the state is concerned. So when we go to a full day program and the full day is what is provided tuition free, then all of our kindergarten students become counted as a full person, which is very nice because they are full people and they should be counted as full people. But the state, where we've actually dipped below our enrollment numbers, and I don't know exactly what that is, and I apologize for not knowing exactly what that threshold is that they held us harmless at. But as we get closer to that, because that number alone will change our student population, then we will come to a place where, even as our numbers are going down, or our numbers are stabilized, I should really say, that we would be able to continue to look at the state to have them also recalculate our state aid. But we're not actually counting on that. That's why we're looking at saying that we're going to have to find $316,000 in our FY24 budget.
Okay, thanks.
Just to clarify, because I know this is a public record, it's 319.
Oh, thank you. 319.
Thank you, Pat. So I'll just, I'll throw one of my comments in here. I think several people have already touched on this, and I think what you're hearing is a little bit of concern from both select board members and finance committee members about absorbing in full day kindergarten when it seems the math doesn't really seem to work out very well at first glance. Pat had said in a previous meeting that step increases account for like 1% of the budget, or like a 1% increase. And then, you know, a lot
1% of
times you've got-
salary.
Yep.
1% of salary.
Yep. And then a 2% COLA on top of that. So you're talking a pretty hefty increase just carrying forward. And I think it's just, none of us really are seeing where those opportunities will be, but we'll be anxious to see going forward what you guys come up with.
I do understand that, and I appreciate the fact that we also haven't done like the full presentation with all the rationale and breaking down the numbers in a forum like this, or even with the select board or with the finance committee. And so, I mean, that's something that we can also do to kind of help people understand. You know, we did walk through with the school committee, and like Valerie said, we had multiple meetings with the finance subcommittee of the school committee as well too. And I think there is a layer of uncertainty, and I acknowledge that, because the other thing is I can't directly answer Heather's question about where those funds going to come from, because I don't necessarily know how that might impact staffing. But what I do know is I'm looking at the trajectory, and I do know the way in which we think that we can look at that, knowing just even on what we've needed to do this year, watching just those numbers roll forward, knowing the impact that that's going to have on the next couple of years as well too. I just can't say for certainty exactly where it would be identified yet, and I can understand the concern that would be.
Okay, thank you. I'll just add one other question that I had. I know several of your contracts still are not settled. Is there any sort of timeline or estimate on that?
We have 10 that are expiring in June, and we are in negotiations for 2 of them right now. Many of them are all connected in one way, so you can't do more than one of them at a time. So I don't know exactly whether we'll be looking to extend any of the current contracts and try to get it so that we ended up with 10 in 1 year just because of some extensions over COVID. I mean, ideally, I think everybody agrees that trying to have a more balanced or a better distributed negotiation cycle would be better. It just sort of happened that way as over the 2 years of COVID. So that's one of the things we're talking about, is looking at I think a strategic, proactive way that can be supportive of all of our units and employees, that can also still balance, so we don't have every 3 years 10 contracts expiring at the same time. But we're only in negotiations for 2 of them right now.
Okay, yeah, that would be great if you could spread them out a little bit. I think that would probably help you as well.
I think it would help everybody. I really think everybody would be helped by that.
I have another one unless somebody else has a question. Dennis, go ahead.
Doctor, when you were discussing the the enrollment figures at the kindergarten level and below and adjusting the numbers. I just picked up a little bit on the connection to local aid. Is there any danger of losing local aid if enrollment numbers drop?
No, that's the hold harmless piece, right? We actually already dipped below our threshold. And they don't take away the aid.
Good.
But
Thank
before it increases, we have to get back to our threshold.
you. Okay. No increase.
Hari, were you raising your hand or?
Yeah.
Okay. go ahead.
So I have more like a high level question than this one. Watching the school committee proceedings, I gather that it's a unanimous consent that the budget was held back because there is not an amount of money that the town can appropriate. Not the town meaning town management, but Prop 2.5 and some other things that are holding back the budget requests by school, right? So that's one thing. Enrollment is dwindling. That's another thing. So which means more money has to be spent by fewer people to get to school where we want to run our schools. This is no brainer that it's going to a train wreck, right? So is school committee and other town committees are trying to approach this problem? It's a multi-year problem. I don't expect this to be solved in a day or two, but it's going to be a multi-year problem, and probably it needs all hands on deck towards gradually getting into where the funding meets expenses.
I'm not sure exactly if I followed a question, Hari. I understood what you were saying. I would say one of the things that I think that we all kind of, it's just, and you have this process in place, which I think is great for a very specific reason. One of the things that we're trying to do at the school level is to truly look at how we're structured and look at, the ways in which we're funding and the ways in which we are allocating the resources. I feel like as a town, we need to do that as well too, right? And so I feel like there might be questions that we might have outside of the budget. I mean, we're kind of always in a budget season, right? But outside of that, really having sort of proactive conversations with these three committees to talk about sort of different structures. And I don't know what that looks like on the town side. I just
Me neither, but I think that you said the right words is to outside the budget structure, right? That's probably will help us into the right place. Yeah, thank you for thinking those words. By the way, I just want to commend you and all the school committee and everybody to reconcile the budget from the town end and the WPS end before we come here. It really helps to be here where everybody has met and agreed to a certain numbers when we start reviewing the budget. Thank you.
Anybody else? I have a couple more. All right, I'll go since I'm not seeing anyone else's hand unless I'm missing it. One question I had is on the WA parking revolving account and why more of that isn't being used.
I just know that historically that there are very specific limitations as to what that can be used for. But I think that when we talk about the policies that we're looking at with all of the different revolving accounts and kind of setting different caps and benchmarks and uses and how we do that, I think that will also be included in that. I don't know if Pat can give a more specific answer as to the numbers this year and what we're looking at with FY23, but I do know that I just know that there's limitations as to how that can be.
So just before Pat jumps in, so what we were told, I believe 2 years ago before the fee increase from $50 to $200 went in, is that fund can actually be used for, I believe, any maintenance on the WA campus. And so that sort of opened up some room there for what it could be used for, but I don't know if Pat, if you have anything else to add.
So two things I was going to add. One is I think we offset some plowing against it too. And then I think I had mentioned in one of the answers that we offset some staffing for management of the traffic flow in the morning.
Mhm.
And then the other thing that I was hoping, because remember that I inherited the entire fee structure, is that in working with Valerie in the finance subcommittee of the school committee, was in addition to looking at revolving fund account balances, that would seem to be logically tied to a review of the fee structure.
Okay, yeah, that was one of my questions also, but just one other thing on the parking. So it's estimated that at the end of FY23, there'll be $95,000 in that account. And if I could just put a plug in for repainting the lines in that parking lot, in that senior parking lot, as the parent of 3, soon to be WA grads and 1 recent who have tried to park in that parking lot, may want to look at the lines.
Thank
Noted.
you for that feedback.
And then on to the fees. So in addition to looking at policies around spending the revolving funds, will all of the fees, I'm talking athletic fees, parking fees, everything, will those be looked at on a little bit more of a consistent basis going forward so that they keep in line with expenses?
So if I may jump in, I see them related. I see a review of the revolving fee balances being related to cyclically reviewing the fees.
Okay.
I see them as interrelated, not
Good.
separate.
Great. Thank you.
Valerie, I hope I didn't step on the speaking for the subcommittee.
Heather?
I'm just gonna go back to that parking revolving real quick. And one, I'm gonna just say, there's an Instagram account for bad parking at WA. I don't know if you adults know that, but it's interesting to check out. But also I feel terrible that I don't remember this, but I know that there's been a request for a maintenance vehicle, the plow could be thrown on. Can that be paid for out of that fund, or did that go through capital and I just can't remember?
That's been in the capital discussion.
Did it get granted or did it make the list this year? And if it didn't, is that something that would qualify?
Dan, I thought it did make the list.
It's definitely on the list, and I think we were talking about using school parking fees briefly about that, and the rationale was that we're collecting all the fees at Westford Academy, and this truck is needed elsewhere as well. So it's not only for WA.
Okay.
So it's going through it's being paid for through free cash.
Okay. I just have a couple more, Christina, if that's okay.
Sure. Go ahead.
My brain's just kind of catching up with your overview this evening, Dr. Chu. And I think for the out of district, it mentioned that it would be a $300,000 increase next year. I thought in one of our Q&As that we had that population of students was actually decreasing. So is it really that inverse relationship that you'll have less out of district students, but they will be at a higher rate?
I could speak to that. So the number for the budget for FY23 was actually calculated out with an increase in transportation cost, and in the hope that we don't wind up $300,000 overdrawn like we were this year. So it is possible that the decrease in out of district placements equates to a decrease. Here's why not as much also, because the district is very good at having multiple students in the same out of district placement. A reduction in student count is not going to eliminate the need to drive to that location. So all of this was considered in coming up with the budget number.
So the tuitions would go up as well, you're thinking? But on one of the slides, it went from 5 million to 5.3, or am I off by?
So the tuition number is also a hard calculated number. And if you were to ask me to identify areas of vulnerability going into FY23 in the budget, I would say out of district tuitions is one of our areas of vulnerability. There's not much of a cushion in that number. And that's a number that's calculated based on a spreadsheet and current students and students that are potentially going out. And then a small cushion, a cushion much smaller than I would have hoped for.
Do you all do, and I feel like I should know this, but is there like a 5-year plan? I mean, we see the pie chart where there's 80x% of amounts attributable to salaries, which can kind of be calculated. So it seems like a 5-year plan might make somebody like myself more comfortable with absorbing some of these costs. Or is that just too convoluted of a project to do with all the changes?
I don't think it's too convoluted of a project. It's actually, that is what we started with the full day K program, right? Like we specifically looked at that and we were trying to be very, very strategic in the way that we're looking at it. And so being able to project things out is something that Pat and I have talked about being able to do. There are some variables that make that more difficult, but it doesn't mean that we can't still have a more specific game plan. I think, is that a safe way to say that, Pat?
It is, and I want to give a shout out to Dan. Dan and I met during break week and we went over some documents that the town had that would be appropriate for me to tweak for our needs. So yes, it is definitely a goal.
Is that something that would be worthwhile doing before you try to absorb some of these costs that we all seem to have some reservations about?
It was on my short to-do list. But full day kindergarten, I believe full day kindergarten has been school committee approved, right? So it's not, at this point, it would be after the fact.
All set, Heather.
Yes, thank you.
I guess-
Anybody else? Dennis?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions regarding the capital expenditures. Probably just a clarification. I noticed that there was a item in the capital budget for some sort of wastewater repair to one of the schools. There was also, I know that Dr. Chu's talked about his reallocation study. I think that I thought was included in the capital budget. And then there were some items related to the town school safety task force. I think the question I have for you is, what is the criteria for determining whether you handle it with your own capital budget or it goes over to the town side for capital improvements?
Well, I mean, our capital projects are part of the town
So they're one and the same?
project. Yeah, it's all one and the same.
Okay.
We just have our own, we have our own requests, but then we'll bring them as a department that's sharing that information. Is that the best way to say that, Dan?
clarifies it. I thought that you had your own capital expense account and so you basically operate off the town side. Okay,
Correct.
got it.
Yeah, it's pretty much anything over, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, over $10,000. I forget what the lifespan has to be, X number of years. Except computers. Correct? Yeah, okay.
That's 5 years, Christina.
5 years, thank you.
Got it.
I had a question. Did the solar credits ever get tracked down?
So that is definitely a work in progress. It's a reasonable sized project. We are working on it. We're actually making a lot of progress, but I haven't gotten a chance to review it, which is why I don't want to speak to it yet because I haven't gotten to review it. But yes, and that should help us offset electrical costs. Dan, Eric, and myself had a conversation about a week ago about what it takes to transfer them from one building to another. And so that'll be a process.
Okay. I had also asked about possibly keeping that line separate just so that you can see the credits rather than rolling them in to the electric payments, because I feel like it sort of muddies the water a little bit. You don't know how much was
So
actually.
as in, so
spent.
one line would be an expense and one line would be a credit. So then that,
Could be, yeah.
I could take a look at that and see how viable that is.
Okay,
Probably wouldn't start it this year.
that's fine. Thanks, Pat. Any other questions? I'm not, oh, Tom, go ahead.
Hi, this is really a sort of compliment to Chris and Pat in their debut year doing this. So there was better kind of coordination and collaboration amongst all the different school and town agencies in this cycle than I can remember. So, great way to start things off. And the second is a follow-up to a comment I think Chris made in the joint chairs meeting recently, which was that it might be useful, given the sort of questions and the opportunity, but also the challenge of integrating full day kindergarten into the budget. Maybe we could ask for a joint select board FinCom session and upcoming select board meeting, just spending 15 minutes just going through how that's going to work, sort of marching out year by year. I know that Chris and Pat have done the work to sort of explain how that transition works, but I think it could use a little bit more discussion.
Thank you for the compliment. And yeah, I think we'd be happy to do that. And I would also again want to include Carrie Cleary and Courtney Moran in that discussion as well too, because the three of them, the two of them along with Pat, really did a lion's share of that work, looking at those numbers initially. But yeah, that'd be a great idea to kind of walk everybody through that.
Catherine?
Could I just say on the full day kindergarten, because I know that was my initial reaction when we're obviously about how we fund it. In one of our recent meetings, Pat shared with us that I think she had been on a call with, I think Pat, it might have been the state finance. And for me, hearing this information actually really gave me confidence in our decision, because the belief is there's such few towns and communities in Massachusetts now that offer full day kindergarten, that we believe it's kind of coming down the road in the next couple of years that it will become mandatory. Full day kindergarten must be offered in every public district. And that in the same conversation, it was kind of said that we may not necessarily be given extra funding to kind of jumpstart that. So I actually thought it was really good information to have, to see that we're actually being proactive, knowing that this is probably coming down the tracks to us anyway, and that we're kind of, jumping ahead of it and making a solid plan so that we're not taken by surprise with it.
Thank you, Catherine. I had a couple of other follow-ups. At one point, it was discussed that circuit breaker may start to include or cover transportation. Did that come? What happened with that?
So
Pat?
I believe the state initially discussed implementation of that in FY20, but was unable to meet that goal. So in FY21, they did, and to a greater degree in FY22. So yes, it was implemented, albeit a year late. And we do file. If you ever go on to the Circuit Breaker website, out on DESI, you'll see that there is a column for tuition costs. There's a column for transportation cost. And so yes, we participate, they're implementing, albeit late.
And do you know roughly how much of that is covered?
Now, what I could easily get you is how much we got from it, but I don't have the backup documentation to find out. I don't think like what percentage of our cost that was.
Okay, if you could provide any of that later, I'd appreciate that.
I'd be happy to.
And also, if we could also find out what student population DESI is holding us to, like where is that cutoff? I'd be interested in that number as well. Anybody else? I think we might be wrapping up. Does anybody have anything else?
No.
All set? Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chris and Pat. Answering those questions was fabulous. You guys did a great job. There were a lot of questions. I think nobody else, we can move on to approval of minutes. Finance Committee I think we're going to push our approval of the minutes from the March 3rd meeting to our next meeting on March 24th, just because we do not have a quorum here that was at that last meeting, but I will leave it to the select board if you want to approve those minutes for yourself, because it was a joint meeting.
I think it'd be a good idea for us to go ahead and do that. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes from March the 3rd?
So moved.
A second?
Second,
Okay, all in favor, Scott,
aye.
Tom? Anita?
Aye.
I'll vote aye. Did you hear
Aye.
Tom? Okay,
Aye. Sorry, my audio went crazy.
so
for
it's
a second.
approved 4-0.
Thanks.
And then do I have a motion for the select board to adjourn?
So moved,
So moved. Second.
All in favor, Scott,
aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Anita,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Thank you very much, Christina.
Thank you.
Thanks, good night.
Good night, everybody. Happy
Thank you.
trails there, Tom.
Did a good job, John.
School committee, do you need to adjourn or you just,
Yes,
you do? Okay.
yeah,
Go
let's do
ahead.
that.
If
Do I have a
you-
motion to adjourn from the school committee?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, Sean,
Aye.
Alicia,
Aye.
Valerie,
Aye.
Gloria,
Aye.
Catherine,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. That's 6-0 to adjourn. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank
FinCom.
you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. So our next agenda item for the finance committee is the board and committee updates. I just left this as a standing item just in case anything needed to be, brought up. It's only been a week since our last meeting and I can't imagine there's anything, but if anybody has any updates,
Oh, none.
no, okay. I
Do
didn't
we
think
actually
so.
have do we have a quorum, Christina?
We do.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
Six, just barely. We've got our 6.
Okay.
So our next meeting isn't for 2 weeks. It's on the 24th. And I think it's public safety.
That's correct. It is.
And, yeah, okay, and Dennis. So questions go to Dennis, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. When did we need those by, Dan? I think it's like this, is it the 16th or is it earlier than that?
I think it's right around, I'm just gonna check the schedule, just to confirm. See here. Usually it takes a couple days to answer all of them, so let me see here. The 16th, yeah, that's correct.
And that's to
next-
Dennis by the 16th or? to-
Yeah, if we can get them to Dennis by the 16th, please CC me on as well. And then, if we can turn those around pretty fast, Dennis, we can get those to department heads. We hope to have them back to you early the next week if possible.
Do that.
Sounds great. All right. If nobody has anything else,
There's a
could
hand
I?
up.
Oh,
Sorry.
Heather.
I have one. So they had mentioned having that meeting with select board to have the school committee go a little more in depth. When do we have schools back again? I don't have the schedule in front of me.
I think we can. We do have a meeting towards the end where we can call back departments. I can't remember exactly which. I want to say it's one of the May meetings.
Actually, they're on the April 7th
Oh.
agenda item as any follow-up questions,
Okay.
so.
I'm wrong.
I'm just wondering if we could see, I mean, it's not really up to us, I guess, but it would be great to have that select board meeting before we circle back with the schools. Because I think we all kind of have a lot of, reservations about how they're gonna fold in a big item when we've had historical problems with them.
Yeah. I also wonder how much they're really going to be able to, how much detail they're going to be able to share. But we can certainly look at that.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to see them before they come back again, but
Just so I understand, is everybody's concerned the fact that they may be overextended on the, on those funds coming in from the, okay, because I understand what you're saying. I just want to make sure that I was reading it right.
Well, overextended on which funds, Dennis?
Well, I think the ESSER 2 and then was it the grant 240 there and some of the other money that came in, where, the town manager specifically said, look, don't plan your budgets with this money. So, you know, it looked as though that he had made some reference to the fact that, you know, I'm talking about Dr. Chu, that some of these things were contingent on these funds, and then there was going to be a transition at some point into the general budget because of other budget changes. So there's a, you know, it's a little bit of a calculated risk, I suppose, but I just want to make sure that I want to make sure I was reading everybody the same way. That's all.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're all a little concerned about them absorbing $1 million over the next 3 to 4 years, when historically that's not really been the way things go.
Okay.
Okay, so if everyone's all set, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second,
Heather,
aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Hari,
Aye.
Dennis,
Aye.
Beth,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Good night. See you guys in 2 weeks.
Good night, everybody.
Hey.